Hello and welcome to the How to Play video for Wroth, a new area control game from Chip Theory Games that can be played solo, co-op, and PvP. In this video, we will be covering the base rules for PvP. To begin a game of Wroth, you'll place the map and victory point tracker in the center of your playspace. Place the wild action token over the Exodus symbol. Each player should sit in front of a different deployment zone. This is where your troops will be entering the fray. Next, you'll shuffle up all region value tokens and assign 8 of them at random, 1 to each of the 8 regions outlined on the region number reference card. These tokens represent the points that you'll gain if you control or dominate this region at the end of a round. To win a PvP game of Wroth, you'll be attempting to reach 40 points first. Now create a pool of action dice. Grab 2 dice per player plus 1. Return any unused dice to the box. Next, each player will select a faction. The faction mats are double-sided to cover all play modes. In PvP, you'll be consulting this side of the faction mat. Each faction has their own set of elite units, or abilities, as well as a unique feat card, which is a once-per-game ability specific to that faction. These are the key details to consider when choosing your faction. If several players each want to play as the same faction, set aside those factions. Each player chooses a different faction and plays a mini-game of Wroth to 20 victory points to determine who gets to pick the faction in dispute. If another dispute occurs, repeat this step, playing to an even minier game of Wroth at 10 victory points. If you'd prefer, you can roll the 8-sided die, with the higher number claiming the disputed faction. If this results in a tie, each player chooses a different faction and plays a minigame of Wroth to 20 victory points to determine who wins the die roll. Once you've chosen your faction, you'll set up your player mat. Place 25 of your regular troop tokens, matching your faction color, into the regular troop area. Next, place all of your faction's elite unit dice in their designated space, set to the number matching the mat. Now grab the feat card associated with your faction and flip it face up. Don't forget to grab an all-seeing die and place it on your mat. Place a regular troop token from each player next to the victory point tracker. These will be used to track each player's victory points. Next, each player will begin by deploying 3 regular troops to their deployment zone. Regular troops are your faction's grunts. They're low-level units that are considered to have 1 HP. Regular troops will differ from your faction's elite units, which will have a Cora cost to deploy, a starting health ranging from 1 to 5, a unique ability, and sometimes they'll grant an additional bonus to victory points if they are in a region that you control. Now give the first player marker to the first person to use the word Wroth properly in a sentence. This concludes setup, and now it's time to start the game. Wroth is played in rounds, and each round is made up of 6 phases. Phase 1, Spoils. During this phase, players will gain benefits from the regions they control that have benefit symbols. This phase is skipped during the first round of the game. These benefits are Mine, Extend, Maneuver, and Battle. If a player controls a region with one of these benefits, they may take that action as though they were spending an action die with the matching face at this time. We haven't gone over action dice, so I'll skip these descriptions for now. These benefits are gained in the order of the region numbers that they are placed on. Once all players have gained benefits from the regions they control, you'll move on to the next phase. Phase 2, Laying Groundwork. During the Laying Groundwork phase, each player will reinforce by placing 2 regular troops from their faction mat onto their deployment zone. Next, you'll Discern. You do this by rolling your all-seeing die and placing it back on your mat, displaying the rolled result. This result can be used once per round at any time during one of your turns. It is re-rolled during this phase each round, even if the previous result was unused. And finally, you'll end this phase by allocating. To allocate, each player simply takes 1 Cora from the stockpile and adds it to their mat. Cora is your currency. It's how you'll be dispatching your elite units and activating other abilities. Now that we've completed laying groundwork, it's time for the draft. Phase 3, the draft. The first player gathers all of the action dice and rolls them. Each action die has 5 possible faces. 1 Mine face, which lets you take 1 Cora from the stockpile. 1 Extend face, which lets you deploy up to 2 regular troops from your mat to any region where you have 1 or more troops. 1 Maneuver face, which lets you move up to 2 regular troops from your mat to the deployment zone, or move up to 2 of your deployed troops from one region to a single adjacent region. 1 Exodus face, which allows you to choose a region and move as many of your troops as you want from it, to any adjacent region or regions. And 2 battle phases, which let you deal 1 damage to an enemy troop in either a region you occupy or a region adjacent to a region you occupy. Here are the rolled results. Starting with the first player, each player will draft 1 die and place it on their faction mat without changing the face. This continues until only 1 die remains. Once all the dice have been drafted, you'll move on to actions. Phase 4, Actions. The Actions phase is where each player will use the dice that they have just drafted. Starting with the first player, each player will spend 1 of their action dice to take a turn. During a player's turn, they can spend an action dice to take the corresponding action. If a player is unhappy with one of their dice, or doesn't have a use for it, they can always spend it to move 1 regular troop from their mat to their deployment zone. A player may also choose to spend 2 of their dice to take a wild action. Available wild actions are represented by the uncovered icons on top of the victory point tracker. Once a player takes a wild action, they move the marker to cover the action that was just taken. The next player to take a wild action will be unable to choose the action that was just taken. In addition to spending an action die, a player may also spend Cora to deploy elite units or activate abilities on their turn. Spent Cora is returned to the stockpile. A player may also spend their All-Seeing die at any time during their turn by removing it from their mat. The All-Seeing die is a powerful tool with 4 possible faces. 1 Mind Face, which allows you to take 1 Cora from the stockpile. 1 Strike Face, which allows you to deal 1 damage to any troop on the map. 2 Assault Faces, which deal 2 damage to a region you occupy or to a region adjacent to a region you occupy. And 2 Double Faces, which immediately repeat another action die effect that you just carried out. A player may also use their feat card during their turn. This is a powerful ability that can only be used once per game. After activating a feat, flip your feat card face down to track that it has been used. If a player's turn to act comes and they have no more dice to spend, their turn is skipped. Once all action dice have been spent, the actions phase ends. Phase 5, Victory Points. This is the part of each round where you'll tally up points and try to claim the crown. If it's the first round of the game, skip this phase and proceed immediately to Phase 6. To award victory points, you'll consult each region in order, starting with Region 1. If a player controls a region, they will gain victory points equal to the token on that region. To control a region, your faction must have the most troops in that region. If a player dominates a region, they gain victory points equal to the token on that region plus 1. To dominate a region, you must be the only faction with troops in that region. If you have elite units in a region that you control or dominate, make sure to consult your faction mat as some of them grant a victory point bonus. At the end of this phase, if any one player has 40 or more victory points, they've won. If no one hit 40 during the victory points phase, you'll move on to the final phase of a round. Phase 6, Initiative Passes. In this phase, the first player will pass the first player chip to the next clockwise player, and a new round will begin. Now let's watch the second round in action so that we can see all of the phases in full. We'll start where we left off in round 1. Phase 1, Spoils. Now we assess each region with a benefit in region order to determine if anyone gets a benefit. The Uglin player controls Region 4, which provides the Mine benefit. This gains them 1 Cora from the stockpile. No other faction controls a region with a benefit, so we'll move on to the Laying Groundwork phase. Each player deploys 2 of their regular troops from their mat to their deployment zone. Each player rolls their All-Seeing die to determine the face that they'll have access to this round. The Guild player rolled an Assault result. The Alden player also rolled an Assault result. And the Uglin player rolled a double result. Then each player gains 1 Cora from the stockpile. Next, we'll move on to the draft phase. The first player gathers up and rolls all of the action dice. The rolled results are Exodus, Maneuver, 2 Mine, and 3 Battle. The draft order begins with the first player. The Guild player is looking to better position their troops across the mat, so they take the Exodus die. The Alden player would also like to get some movement, so they take the Maneuver die. The Uglin player would like some movement, but all faces that grant movement have been drafted. They take an attack die and will likely spend it, and another die, to take a wild action. The pick order has returned to the Guild player, who takes an attack die so they can do some damage after their troops have spread out. The Alden would like to be able to bring out an elite troop this turn, but they're short on Cora, so they take the Mine die. And finally, the Uglin take another unusable attack die, as they're planning to take a wild action anyways. In future rounds, this remaining die will be granted to the player in last place, but right now, everyone is tied for last at 0 points, so the die remains unclaimed for the round. Now that the draft is completed, the action phase begins, starting with the first player. The guild want to make a big splash this round, so they activate their feat card. They flip their feat card face down to indicate that it can't be used again, and gain 10 Cora. This brings their total Cora count up to 12. The Chrysan Elite unit costs 2 Cora, so the guild player spends 6 Cora to summon all 3 of their Chrysan Elite units. The Stellan units also cost 2 Cora. The guild player spends another 6 Cora to summon all 3 of their Stellan units. Next, they use their Exodus die. This allows them to move all of their units in one region to any number of adjacent regions. Regions 1 through 6 are adjacent to the guild deployment zone, so they try to evenly spread their units across the map, placing a few extra in areas they want to ensure control of. The guild then uses their all-seeing die to remove all competition from the board. Next up is the Alden player. They begin their turn by spending their maneuver die to move an elite troop and a regular troop to an adjacent region. They then spend a single Cora to deploy a Winden. This unit is able to deploy into any Alden occupied region, so they choose to deploy it directly into the region they just entered. The Alden player is aware that the guild player's Chrysan unit will deal damage equal to the number of Chrysan in play if they attack in a region with a Chrysan. They are also aware that the guild player has an attack die that they could use on their next turn to make an attack. If left unchecked, this would allow the guild player to deal 3 damage to the region the Alden just entered. In an effort to prevent this, the Alden player uses their all-seeing die to deal 2 damage to a region they occupy. They apply all of this damage to the Chrysan unit, which has only 2 vitality. The Chrysan unit is defeated and returned to the guild player's mat, where it can be purchased again on a future turn. The Alden player then passes to the Uglin player. The Uglin player has 2 attack dice, but their only troops on the board are in their deployment zone. Since a faction can't attack from or be attacked in their deployment zone, the Uglin are unable to use either of these die faces. This leaves them with 2 options. They could spend an unusable die to deploy a single regular troop, or they could spend both dice to take an available wild action. They consult the available wild actions and decide that they'd like to maneuver so that they can get more troops on the board. Before doing so, they decide to spend 2 Cora to deploy a nameless unit. Next, they spend 2 action dice to take the maneuver action. This causes the wild action token to move and cover up the action that was just taken. Now they move their nameless troop and one of their regular troops into an adjacent region. Next, they decide to use their all-seeing die to double this action, moving the same 2 troops once more to another adjacent region. It's the guild player's turn once more. They use their attack die on the Alden to try and get back some control of the 2-point region. They are not attacking in a region with a Stellan or a Chrysan, so they don't gain any modifiers to this attack. As the attack is only going to deal 1 damage, they decide to remove a regular troop to lower the overall number of Alden present in the region. This concludes the guild player's turn. The Alden player uses their mind die to gain a single Cora. They notice that the round is about to end, and the guild player has spread out heavily across the board. To prevent them from scoring a pile of points, the Alden player activates their feat card. They flip their feat card face down to indicate that it can't be used again, and then deal up to 2 damage to each region. First, they deal 2 damage to the Chrysan in Region 1. This reduces its vitality to 0 and returns it to the guild player's mat. Next, they deal 2 damage to Region 2, removing all troops from the region. In Region 3, they deal 1 damage to the regular troop and 1 damage to the Stellan troop, reducing its vitality to 2. In Region 4, they deal 2 damage to the Stellan troop, reducing its vitality to 1. In Region 5, they deal 2 damage to the Chrysan. In Region 6, they deal 1 damage to remove the 1 opposing regular troop present. In Region 7, they deal 1 damage to the regular troop and 1 damage to the nameless troop, reducing its vitality to 2. There are no troops present in Region 8, so they skip it. This concludes the Alden's turn. The turn would then pass to the Uglin, but as they have no action dice, their turn is skipped. There are no players left with action dice, so now we'll move on to the victory phase. We'll start with Region 1. The Guild are the only faction present, so they dominate this region. They gain the point value of the region for controlling it, plus an additional 1 victory point for dominating it. Nobody controls Region 2, so nobody scores. The Guild dominates Region 3, so they gain the point value plus 1. They also have an elite unit present in a region they control. They check their mat and discover that this troop grants plus 1 victory points if it's present in a Guild-controlled region. The Guild gains 3 victory points from this region, bringing their total to 5. The same result applies to Region 4, bringing their victory point total to 8. And again in Region 5, where they gain 4 victory points, bringing their total to 12. Moving on to Region 6, we see that the Alden not only control this region, but they dominate it. They also have 2 elite units that grant bonuses to victory points. As a result, the Alden gain 5 victory points for the region. In Region 7, the Uglan control and dominate. They have an elite unit present, but upon consulting their mat, they discover this unit doesn't grant a victory point bonus. They gain 2 points for the region. Nobody has troops present in Region 8, so scoring has completed. Since no one reached 40, we'll continue on to the final phase of the round. Initiative passes. The Guild player passes the first player token clockwise to the Alden player, and the next round would commence. And there you have it. Those are the PvP basics for Wroth. If you like what you saw, make sure to check out the GameFound page, which we have linked below. If you're interested in different play modes, be sure to check out the next video in this series, How to Play Wroth Solo and Co-op. Thanks for watching!